Hello, everyone. This is Ron Bush with Ron Bush Consulting, and you're listening or watching the Information Playground. We come to you in a number of ways. One is through WVLP, that's 103.1 FM. If you're in Valparaiso, Indiana, that's a great way to catch us. We're on Monday mornings at 8 a.m., Friday afternoons at 1 p.m. Um, you're welcome to stream it from WVLP.org. In fact, I would encourage that. They're a great radio station. They do a lot in the community, and you can be a part of it. Go to their website, WVLP.org, and I think you'll be glad you did. If you're listening to us on demand or outside of Valparaiso, you're probably catching us on podcast under the name The Information Playground. We're on just about all of them: Spotify, um, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts. There's 6 or 7 others. You can also catch us on YouTube, and that's the Information Playground. Now, I have a face made for radio, but my guest, Anthony Sindone, has a great face for television and for broadcasting. So I hope you're catching us on YouTube. Again, the name of the channel is The Information Playground. If you do catch us on the podcast or YouTube, I hope you subscribe. If you're interested, I've got a book available on Amazon called Staying Safe in a Very Dangerous World. Think Before You Click. That's a little book I wrote. I use it for companies that I do cybersecurity risk assessments, those kind of things for. I think it's informative, and hopefully you'll enjoy it if you get it. With that, my guest today is a good friend, Anthony Sindone. Tony, how are you?
Doing fantastic, Ron. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for being on. I always enjoy it, and I think the listeners enjoy it as well. Now, tell the folks a little bit about yourself before we get into it.
All right. Well, I'm a clinical associate professor of finance and economic development for Purdue University Northwest. I teach economics, quantitative methods, finance. I do a lot of work in economic development in terms of data analysis, that sort of thing, to help the local economic development organizations throughout the Northwest Indiana region. I also have a consulting practice where I am a forensic economist, where I assess economic damages that may be caused by someone's actions. And I am an expert witness in both state and federal court cases.
Now,
I'm the father of 4, grandfather of 8, been married for 120, no, been married, my wife's not around. So anyway, I've been married for 32 years happily. So yeah, I guess the rest of it will flush out as we talk.
that's great. It's only an hour program, so don't keep
It's
going
only
on
an
and
hour.
on.
Oh, man, it takes me an hour to introduce myself, man.
So last time you were on, just like now, we're in the midst of the COVID-19 coronavirus. Um, we started down the road talking about education, training, and learning during and after the pandemic. So let's pick up there. What are your thoughts there? Let's get started.
Well, what's very interesting is a lot of people around the country know is that sometime in the middle of March, and it happened on a dime. The middle of March, all education, just I'd say 99.9% of all education was done online. Had a switch from face to face to online, which if we haven't prepared for online platforms, that could be rather stressful for both the teachers, in my case, professors, but even more so by the students.
Sure.
They didn't sign up for that. So, but I'll tell you something, and I'm very impressed because we just finished our semester at P&W just last week. In fact, had my grades turned in on Tuesday this week. But the students really did very well. I mean, they adapted very quickly, and I was so impressed by how many of them really showed how much they learned during this part of the pandemic, if you will. What that led me to believe, and it's something you and I think we talked about this before, is that we are going to start seeing changes in how we deliver education, how we create learning platforms to really, enhance, if you will, learning outcomes. See, a lot of online education is really determined by the discipline of the learner, right? So they have to show up on time, they have to watch the videos, they have to do the readings, so on and so forth. it's a little bit different mindset doing it online than it is in a regular face-to-face class. In a face-to-face class, your teacher will give you an assignment. Usually the assignment will be due either the next class day or shortly thereafter. You come to class, you show up with the assignment. Teacher doesn't always call on you, right? So, but in an online platform, you have to do everything, okay? Which is really great because it really helps you learn more. So I see the future of education to be more of maybe a hybrid. Maybe when we do come out of all this, the lockdown, if you will, we're going to see more online delivery of various forms of material that would be used in education. So we started to see that before the pandemic hit, but it's just simply amplifying as a result of the pandemic because it was forced on us.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think we were starting to turn the corner on quite a few things. This pandemic has just rushed that, and not everyone's been prepared for it. You visited my classes when I taught out at Calumet College. I can't remember if you visited I think you did it at VU as well.
It was VU. I had a couple of your students that worked for me on a project for your class. Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, at Calumet College, it seemed that I always drew the evening course as an adjunct, and they were always 4-hour, one night a week, 4 hours. Now, I can talk for 4 hours. I can probably do more than 4 hours, but I'm not sure anybody's going to be awake at the end of 4 hours. And so I employed a number of things. I would have folks come out and speak to the class. That would be the first 30 minutes to an hour. And I employed for a lot of the testing, the content. I used now this graduated every year because every year the technology got better. The last year I used one of the publishers, the textbook publishers, had now this was on management of it was some technology course. Now I don't remember the name.
Management of keeping one's memory.
That's what it was.
That's what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll go with that. So, but
that escapes me all the time too. So somebody asked me, "Did you teach this course?" I'm going, "No, I don't think so." Then as soon as they leave the room, go, "Yeah, I taught that course for 3 years." So, yeah, that happens.
By the way, I'm Ron Bush. Who are you again?
I forget.
You haven't introduced yourself. Do so. But the book the publisher had arranged it so that as the student read the book and it captured the time and how long they did, it would stop every few paragraphs and test them on comprehension on what they just read. Now, at first the students didn't like it, but by the end of the course, man, they loved it because they actually understood what they were reading. It was a new textbook. Everything, the information was new, and so it was exciting. Now, I did other things with 4 hours other than just that. In fact, I didn't have them read in class. We did projects and we did other things. All of that stuff, I toyed with doing an online class, but I never did an online class. Mm-hmm. So you've done those now. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they're harder to teach. It seems to me as I listen to you, they might be. I know my son's in college, different state, different school, and he's all right with the online stuff because he's young and he's, the kids seem to adapt to this stuff faster. The profs have had a terrible time. Most of them had never used Zoom, and that's what the college went with first, the university went with first. And now some of them have transitioned to Teams. I don't know if that's any easier to use or not, but what's your experience there?
Well, as far as the platform is concerned, that's secondary to how you actually design the course and how you create the learning environment. The last time, actually the very first time I taught an online course, I developed it from scratch because I knew from day one I was going to have this online class. Mm-hmm. And so I really worked very hard. I prepared for the course. I uploaded all the information the students needed, the quizzes, the exams. I made sure that we were interactive at some point, engaging in both what we call asynchronous and synchronous classes. Asynchronous meaning they can view, let's say, my video anytime, and synchronous it would be an appointment, right? So it would be 8 o'clock on a I was going to say 8 o'clock in the morning, but not too many students would do that. So I would say maybe 10 o'clock in the morning, we're going to have an actually online class, and we'll be interactive that way. This last time we had a switch. I mean, I was teaching all my classes face to face, which is great. I love it. But I did have to make one big change in one of my classes. I taught an intro to business class, and the object there was that we were going to actually develop virtual businesses in the classroom, where students would get together in teams and they would have to, come up with business ideas right from scratch, and I talked to them about how to be innovative, how to think creatively, look around for things that are not working as well as you would like them to work. Maybe you can make a business out of its solution, that sort of thing. I try to stimulate their creative juices. And that works great if you're face to face. I didn't know how to really do that online because it's just a different dynamic, Yeah. And so I had to switch the entire theme of the course midstream because I had to switch over. But you asked about Zoom or Teams or anything like that, WebEx, Skype, that kind of stuff. The platforms, they're pretty close in terms of quality. We had an online platform that was actually sold to P&W. They wanted us to use it first. I used it for a day, and then I went to Zoom. I have no stock in Zoom, I should tell you. Maybe I should have, but I don't have any stock in Zoom. But I used Zoom, and it worked out really well. There were some technical differences that were more beneficial from my perspective and for my purposes, doing it the way I did it. But the whole idea is to try to create the learning environment, and that's the key. And understand that the students that you're speaking to are not as interactive with each other as you and I are right now, Ron. Right. Some students are going to be interactive, but some students aren't going to see your videos and not going to take a look at your material for days, for days. And so you have to keep that in mind as you are, developing and presenting the course material. But I agree with you. Just like your son, I think the students just really adapt well. So
yeah, you don't think they binge watch this stuff, do you?
Yes, they do. Oh, I'm telling you, they do this. Yes, almost like the Game of Thrones, except in my case, it's the game of Sindones. So that's what they're going to do. Right? I've had some students that said that to study for the final exam, that they watched, I mean, could you imagine this, watching me for 7 hours straight, watching all my classes. I think they fast forwarded a few times, I would hope, because I fall asleep watching my own videos. But anyway, yeah, they'll do that. It's incredible. They're going to do it any way they like. I don't recommend that. It's like pulling an all-nighter to study for an exam, right? Right. But they'll do it. Sure. Yeah. You can ask them.
I share of all-nighters studying for exams, but I can't imagine watching me or anyone else. Maybe you, but certainly not me. For 7 hours in a row. I'd probably commit Harry or something.
Yeah, it would be good.
So afterwards, after this is over, assuming this isn't the new normal, I'm beginning to really hate that term.
I don't like that term either.
No. But assuming this isn't the way things continue, and I can't imagine they would, I do imagine that there'll be some portion of this. Like we said earlier, we were already turning that corner. We just turned it faster. But I see businesses, many more people working from home. And if you read the stuff that I read, everybody's saying the same thing. That's exactly what's going to happen. Your larger companies, especially your tech companies, Google, Twitter, Facebook, all those guys, they're all, their people are working from home now, and some of them are giving the choice to continue that. Of course, you can see a disruption in the commercial real estate market as a result of this. How much of this do you think will continue?
I think you're really kind of hitting the nail on the head. In other words, you're steadying the nail and you're about to hit it with a hammer, right? So what it is we're seeing a commercial real estate design change. I don't think we're going to see large office spaces in the near future. Realize we don't have to have that. I think that we're going to have spaces that can be used on a temporary basis. only because the technology needed to be in one place, maybe for security purposes.
Mhm.
Maybe there's some real information sensitive materials out there that we don't want to be transmitted over, an insecure internet, um, or other phone lines or whatever. But beyond that, I think we're going to see more and more people working from, it may not be home, but certainly working remotely. And I think since we're becoming socialized to this,
Mhm.
right, we're becoming used to this, we're going to see more of it. But there's a problem with that, Ron. I think you and I talked about this before as well. Not every person in this country or the world has equitable access to the resources.
Right.
So what that might do, it creates another gap, a skills gap, but it's not just skills gap, it's a resource gap, which is going to exacerbate the skills gap, right? Because you've got people that are tech savvy, they're going to do well, and they have access to resources, they're probably going to do pretty well. But then you have a whole lot of the population that they want to have the skill sets and the resources, but they just don't have access to it. And so that's something that we should consider, not just from a public policy standpoint, but also from a private business standpoint. Recognize that there are a lot of talented people out there. There really are,
Mhm.
or potentially talented people out there, but they just don't have the resources that we need them to have. Maybe there's something that we need to do in private business to subsidize those resources. So I think we're going to see more companies doing that as well, not just relying on the government to do all this for us, but actually relying on ourselves in private business to create those resources for the folks.
I've seen a little bit of that. I'm hard pressed to tell you if it was in Forbes or Fortune. Might have been Wired. I read those three magazines,
Mhm.
among others. Um, but one of them had an article recently on different companies and how they're helping not just their employees um, with issues such as that, but the neighborhoods around them, the communities
Mm.
around them. And so, of course, the one that's been in the headlights lately has been Silicon Valley, San Francisco, that area, because they basically priced even workers out of the market. It's I think the cost was that I read most recently was the average price for a one bedroom apartment is 60 some dollars a square foot. Well,
Yeah.
that's like 3,000 a month.
Or
I mean,
more, or more, and and who can afford that, right?
yeah,
And that's the problem. Of course, the non-tech folks, can't afford to live in the city. That's why they had to change the ordinances in San Francisco, for example, because the ordinance was that firefighters and police officers had to live in the city. School teachers had to live in the city. They couldn't.
right.
They simply
Yep.
couldn't do that, right? Unless you want to have 4 or 5 roommates. I don't think it's going to work.
No.
But no, we're starting to see some ways of subsidizing those. I find it interesting that when we use terms, I'm an economist. I'll put my economist hat on now, right? So when we price ourselves out of the marketplace, well, we don't really price ourselves out of the marketplace because some people are paying the price,
Right.
right? So what it is that we are creating a group of people, right? A cohort of folks who can afford that and are willing and able to pay that high price, thereby, carving out, if you will, or putting a barrier up for other people who may want to live, in one of the painted ladies, let's say, painted lady houses in San Francisco. For those people who don't know what painted ladies are, it's not a derogatory term, and it has nothing to do with streetwalkers. It has everything to do with the multiple colors on a house, right? You and I know about this, but there's some people that may not know what that means, and I realize what it came across as. But we see you know, we see more companies that are recognizing that problem, and then maybe they're doing something about it. And you're right, Silicon Valley area is on the forefront of all that.
So afterwards, grade school, junior high, high school. How many how many of those students do you think? And notwithstanding, I mean, those things we need to deal with. I'm hoping a combination. I've been hoping for a partnership between government, business, and education for years in a lot of areas. My work in a SOC, a cybersecurity operations center, and wanting it to happen in Northwest Indiana. I've been I've been talking about that and working towards that. I have yet to see that come about, so I'm not going to get my hopes up too high that it'll happen tomorrow. But a partnership between those three to enable people to have those resources, and I think we have to. I think we literally have to. America is got so much potential and so many things we can aspire to that we haven't even thought of yet. And yet, I mean, we come from a scratchy beginning. I mean, a bunch of guys ran away from England, and then the rest of the world kind of populated the place, and we managed to make a good go of it.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got to do better, and we've got too much potential in front of us not to keep doing that. But do you see any possibility that, and I'm thinking of high school students on down, um, there's stuff that we're talking about, an awful lot of it can be taught in grade schools today. And some of it is in some schools. There's a
Mm-hmm.
few. What are your thoughts?
My grandson, who is now 14, just turned 14, um, when he was 10 years old, he was learning coding in his, I guess, his middle school, right? So, which I thought was fascinating. He was learning how to code, and he was actually coding for your cell phone.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's like learning a new language, right? We know the younger you are, the more likely you are to be able to absorb a new language and learn it to fluency. We're seeing that in technology as well. But getting more directly back to your question, uh, yeah, I see the time that we go into the middle schools or into the grade schools and certainly into the high schools, and we need to really encourage the students to explore their world, explore all the possibilities of the world, not just college prep. My college colleagues always hate when I talk about this, because I say that not everybody should go to college. Not everybody wants to go to college. There are wonderful opportunities that don't require you to have a 4-year degree. Now, it does require education, it does require training, and it does require experience. And so, in that vein, I agree with you, Ron. As you were talking about the partnership among education and government and business, think of it as a three-legged stool, right? You have a three-legged stool. What happens when you take one of the legs away? Well, it doesn't work, does it? No, you fall. So that's what's happening. If we don't understand that we really are sitting on a three-legged stool, you cannot, favor one of those legs over the other. So the private industry is necessary. Why? Because private industry is where you're going to have the innovation. Because entrepreneurs, by their very nature, are innovators. They're creators, right? They're making up new stuff. Okay. Education. What do? Well, you're teaching people how to think. Hopefully, teaching
Yes.
people how to think, not necessarily how to perform tasks, but how to think. And what was the government? Government needs to create an environment where all that can be put together. That's the key. That's the key in our success. That's the key to success in any society. Um, yeah, I do liken it to that three-legged stool thing. But the key there, and there is a key to it, teaching people how to think and how to solve problems. In other words, they have to develop, and I know I sound like a broken record when I say this, but have to develop a love of learning new things. And that has to start at the kindergarten level,
Yeah.
maybe even pre-K. Maybe there's a pre-K anymore. I don't know what that is, but you have to encourage creativity. Don't put kids lockstep in the school system, at least in the very beginning. Allow them to explore, be noisy. No teacher wants to hear that, but let the kids be noisy, because that noise, out of that noise comes some creative results. And then when we become adults, we're not afraid to try new things. Because
Right.
that's the key. That's one of the problems, isn't it? We're afraid to fail, right? If we're afraid to fail, we're never going to do anything else. Okay, I tell my students this all the time. At our university, just like all the universities across the country, we did not have our formal commencement where we all got in our caps and gowns and there was some speeches and the students walk across the stage and get the diplomas and all that stuff, which I think I, as a faculty member, missed, and I know students and their families missed that. But what we did at P&W, at least in our College of Business, and I know other colleges did it too, we actually had video of each faculty member within the departments congratulating the students on their achievements, right? And so on and so forth. And then we listed the names of the students from our particular discipline. And that's all on YouTube, by the way. You can find that, P&W Finance Department Commencement. I think you can find that. And I'm there too, right? And one of the things I said was, I'm looking forward to hearing about your successes and your failures. And yes, I said failures because I know that you know how to overcome your failures because I've seen it. We've all had failures. And from those failures, you really gain a lot of success. And so I said, I'm looking forward to hearing about both of those things. Now we'll see if I hear any of it, but but I really embrace that. You can't be afraid to make a mistake. And where do you learn how not to make a mistake? That it's not very bad to make a mistake when you're small, when you're a little kid. You make mistakes all the time. If we keep that childhood, attitude into our adulthood, we're gonna do very well. So the future of education and business and government interaction. I think it all takes that spark of creativity, and don't be afraid to fail. Try something. If it doesn't work, try something else. It's that simple.
I can't improve on that. I think that's well said, and I agree 100% with it. There's some of that, and always has been. I think it was the last Secretary of Education President Obama had, and I've forgotten the person's name.
I can't remember either. See, it's that memory course I need to take.
I'm Ron Bush. What's your name again? No,
yeah.
So, but I remember him visiting students in China or maybe South Korea. I forget, but I think it was China. Mm-hmm. And he came back in an interview and said that when he was talking to them about education, about trying and failing, that didn't resonate. Those students are going to school. I think they're in classes 12 hours a day or more. They start early in the morning, and then after school, they still have homework. They'll finish it at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night, and then get up the next morning early and hit the school at 7 or 8, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And what came through in that, and it's been a few years, so I've forgotten how it was worded, but it was they lose face when they fail. Mm-hmm. Americans we don't worry so much about that. Yeah. Sometimes perhaps we should.
You should, yeah. I know in my case I should, but yeah.
But he drew the distinction that here, you try something. Let's say you start a business, it fails, you declare bankruptcy. Well, mm-hmm. They're not going to put you in debtor's prison. It's not going to be the end of the world. That's when you stand up and you try it again. I just finished an article on Eddie Rickenbacker, who was the ace of aces of World War I. He went on, he was a race car driver. I mean, the guy did just about everything you'd think of. Started his own automobile company, and the other automobile, the big three, I think, did him in. Yeah. He talked about having a four brake system when all the other cars ran on two. Mm-hmm. Studebaker went after him, some of the others. Oh, say hello to your son there.
Yeah, it's Jonathan. I'm on TV, so don't walk through again. All right. What can you do? I have no door.
It happens on the big three. Why can't it happen to us?
Why can't it happen here? Yeah. Okay.
But, I lost my complete train of thought.
Rickenbacker. You're on Rickenbacker.
Oh, yeah. But the point of the story was that even when he did fail, which was rare, the guy at 5 years old was helping support his family. And at 11, he had to stop because of the depression and things. Mm-hmm. It wasn't the depression. We're talking 1905, whatever. I think his father died. Mm-hmm. Father died at 11, so he had to stop school altogether and work full time, 11 years old, to support the family. So he didn't have a full education, yet he wound up being a big deal in the military, flying planes, being an ace of aces, starting his own automobile company. The guy did everything you can think of. He did fail a few times. Yeah. But you know what? He got up and he started something else.
Sure.
And that's what, I mean, we used to stress that, dust yourself off and try or start all over again. Well, that's true today as it was then.
And the thing is that we know his name.
Yeah.
Right? We know his name because of his successes, not necessarily due to his failures, but if it wasn't for his failures, he may not have been as successful as he had become. So that's the case. I don't want to harp so much on on failure, but just don't be afraid to fail. I tell my students this all the time, and any student has been mine for the last 34 years will tell you that they've heard me say that at least once or twice in every single class. Don't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
So yeah, he went by again. That's
yeah. He was in a hurry though.
Yeah. He's a blur. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, yeah, you can't be afraid. Just can't be afraid. That doesn't mean to be foolish, but you can't be afraid. You were talking about Chinese students, right? As I think I told you, I did teach in the graduate program at VU, right, on occasion, and I taught in the international program over there, and I had a lot of Chinese students. And one of the things that really got to me, because I know you've only seen me teach in one class, in your class, right? But I use the Socratic method of teaching, and I make sure my students can respond and they have to answer questions. And I try to make them think, right?
Uh-huh.
One thing I was really impressed by the Chinese students is that if I asked a question about facts or figures, oh my gosh, they had the answer before I finished the question. Okay. But if I asked them the question, why is this correct? Why does this make sense? They couldn't answer it.
Yeah.
They did not understand the question. Because when they went to school, these are graduate students now, right? When they went to school, right, it was all rote and lockstep, and we're going to learn the facts and figures, and nobody does it better. But to understand why you even asked the question is an important question, right? And that's where the American students actually, quite frankly, had it a little bit over the Chinese students at the time. Not all of them, of course, but that stuck with me. So there's something right about our American education system if we are still encouraging our kids or students to ask the questions why. Challenge the teachers. I tell my students, challenge me. If I tell you something in class, challenge me. Make me back up my statement, but also keep in mind, I'm going to make you back up yours. And so that's, and that way we actually create a learning environment that I think is useful.
I couldn't agree more. Now you mentioned something. I want to turn the corner just a little bit. We can certainly come back, but digital security, the work from home stuff. I can tell you right now. I deal in cybersecurity, so naturally I'm going to look at it from that standpoint. The work from home stuff.
Yeah.
I can tell you right now, we're probably at our most.
Sorry.
The riskiest we have ever been with folks working from home. The way to do it right is for the company to provide the external connection. When people work from home, they're usually working from their home connection, which is not going to be secure. They're usually working with home devices, all connected to that home connection, and they're not going to be secure. And then you've got the issue of connecting to the company server, if that's the case. That connection is not going to be secure, and if it's infected on the home side, it's going to infect the network at the office. So every part of that is wrong. And in most companies, of course, nobody had time to prepare for this. Nobody saw this coming, and so what you have is a very real lack of security. Now, if I can't think of any business that doesn't need to be secure, some more than others, but every business has intellectual property. Every business has clients. They have bank accounts. They may have company credit cards. They have information that they don't want broadcast on the dark web. And that's where I'm worried we may see almost everything going on in America, and maybe the rest of the planet, because we just aren't prepared for it and we aren't moving fast enough. Companies are worried about whether they're going to have income to stay open tomorrow. They don't have money to say, well, whether I stay open or not, I'm going to invest in all this cybersecurity stuff. No, it's not going to happen that way. But it concerns me that we don't have that in place. You've got all kinds of businesses, and some are in the healthcare field, Some are in the financial services industry, who really, of all the industries there are, financial services does the best job of cybersecurity, without hands down.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare is always in a crisis. They're always dealing with crisis, and quite frankly, they're the most profitable of all the industries. So hackers, the good ones, gravitate towards the healthcare
Mm-hmm.
industry. You can buy a credit card on the dark web for $1. You can buy a social security number on the dark web for $1. You'll pay $50 to $75 on the dark web for a medical chart.
Mm-hmm.
So, and while you'll be discovered almost immediately for that credit card number, and to some extent for the social security number, it may be several months before anyone discovers you've hacked in and gotten that medical chart. So the payoff is just that much better. Where do you, I mean, given that as a backdrop, any thoughts on that? Where you see this going? What we need to do?
Yeah, well, you kind of touched on it here, Ron. I mean, this is the business you're in. This is the kind of thing that first you have to recognize there's a problem, right? And by the way, we've known this problem existed for 30 years. People have stolen identities for 50 years, right? There's always a way to do it if you really want to.
You know where that started? Identity theft?
Tell me.
Cemeteries. You go
Well,
to
that
the
makes sense. Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's your name, right? You got somebody's name right there.
Date
Okay.
of birth.
In fact, if you talk to a lot of fiction writers, a lot of novelists, because you ask them, where'd you come up with the name for this character? Well, it was in a cemetery. I saw the name and I was going to use it, right? Because it's a real name, but they're dead and they're not going to use it anymore. So, yeah, that makes sense. It really does.
Back
But
in the day, you could get a birth certificate, just phone them and ask them to send it to you. So
yeah, I'm so and so, and unless they have some record of a death certificate, they're going to send you the birth certificate of that person. Now, of course, if you're well, you have to try to find the right age, some age appropriate. I actually taught my daughter how to launder money under an assumed name, right? And I said the assumed
don't
name.
tell us that. Don't do
I
that.
know you get the name. Everybody knows how to. You get the name out of a cemetery, right? You get the birth certificate, or now it's your birth certificate. It has to be age appropriate, right? And then that's how you're transferring money now. You're doing all that. It's crazy. But I was talking to we have a relative in our family now. He married our niece. He happens to be an FBI agent who actually investigates financial fraud. And so I was talking to him about a seminar I gave on laundering money, and I gave him my little 10-minute spiel on how to launder money. You should have seen the look on his face. He goes, the same terms we use. Hey, it's not that uncommon out there, buddy. People know it. And all I did was Google it a little bit. That's it.
Yeah.
But my thoughts on your question, look, it is going to create, there are threats obviously out there, but they also create opportunities. There has to be a lower cost way of protecting yourselves. I remember once asking you about securing a password, right? And I think the answer I remember, I don't know if you said it this way, but you said, yes, it has to be 14 characters, upper and lower case, symbols, numbers, and don't use any two passwords. Don't use the same password in any two places. And I've got, 24 passwords. I'm going, what? Oh, well, then here, Tony, I'll sell you my password management program. There you go, right? But there's opportunities, right? Yeah. With every threat or every, the problem that we have, there's an opportunity. And I think that we're going to see more of that. The faster we have access to data, yes, the more likely hackers are going to be able to get into it, but also the faster we're going to be able to discover it. And so I think, and you know more about that world than I do specifically, but I think that we're going to see a lot of opportunities for cybersecurity, especially, look, it isn't just, hacking into a bank account or your social security number. Was it you that told me the story about how somebody hacked into a casino? Somebody hacked into a casino through a fish tank. Yes. Okay. It wasn't you. All right. So anyway, there's a casino. It was in another part of the country that they had a data breach. You know, people go to the casinos, they use the hotel, and they use credit cards and debit cards and all that stuff. And that information is stored on their servers. The servers are protected. They have firewalls, and you can't get into the server directly. Well, it turns out that they're using IoT, Internet of Things, to sense the pH levels and the food levels of the giant fish tank they had on display in the middle of the casino. Well, the hackers figured out that that information would be a way to get into the servers. And that's how they got in. Yeah. They got in through the fish tank. Would you believe this? So they're very creative people.
Yes.
If they actually use that intellect and ability for good, they'd still make the same amount of money, if not more, because those skills are in high demand. Heck, you would hire that person. So
I could not agree more.
Yeah.
By the way, it's 16 characters.
Oh, that's what. See, I knew. See, I underestimated. 16.
And you have to use a password manager, and you need to change them every 30 to 45 days to boot.
Yeah, there you go.
Because all your passwords are now on the dark web because they keep hacking into companies to get the current password.
That's it.
So if you don't change it, your old one works.
I change my passwords, I say, once every couple of months. So apparently it's too long. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, that's better than most people. Far better than most
actually, people. At the university, they force us to change them. They give us a certain amount of time to change our passwords. And then we have the two-factor authentication thing. I think that's helpful.
It is.
But I'm not convinced that that's not hackable either.
Oh, it is hackable.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Honestly, there is nothing that's not hackable. It's the old lock. There is no lock that one man or one company can create that other people can't figure out how to break. I mean, that's just how it is. Right. I have enjoyed our conversation so much. I missed my halfway point. So let me do a little self-identification here. Mm-hmm. Folks, you're listening to Anthony Sindone, my good friend and one of my favorite guests. Just good to talk to, whether it's online or not. I'm Ron Bush. This is the Information Playground. We underwrite the Information Playground, but if you're interested, you have the opportunity to underwrite it as well by going to wvlp.org. Please check them out. They're a great radio station. They do a lot in the community, and you can be a part of that. Additionally, you can find us on any of the podcast platforms. Look for The Information Playground. And by the same token, go to YouTube and look for The Information Playground. We're coming up on 15 minutes left. So I want to get into displaced workers and universal basic income concept. If we have time, I really want to get into all the opportunities that are available. So I'm going to ask you to lead off and we'll go from there.
All right, we'll lead off with displaced workers, okay? There are lots of workers, obviously, as a result of the pandemic that were working primarily in the hospitality industry. We're talking about an 80% cut in revenues to hospitality, and that includes restaurants and those types of organizations. And a lot of those folks just simply don't have jobs anymore. Now, grocery store jobs have come up a little bit. But that's, once we start getting into, I don't want to call it the new normal either, but once we start coming out of this, we won't see as much shopping in the grocery stores as we have been. Although people are discovering how to cook at home, which is interesting. So we'll see how that fleshes out in the next couple of years. And it'll take a couple of years for this all to work out, by the way. Mm-hmm. It's not going to it turned on a dime, but it's not going to come back on a dime. It's just not. So anyway, displaced workers, what's going to happen? They have to realize they need to acquire skills that are in demand, that are not necessarily in hospitality, not necessarily in restaurants. Those are good places to start, by the way, to learn how to show up to work on time, develop a work ethic, earn some income, but then leverage that income, if you will, into acquiring other skills that would be necessary to elevate your productivity, therefore your incomes. So I've always stressed that. There's nothing wrong with delivering pizzas. There's nothing wrong with working in a restaurant. We've all done that at one time, right? My first real job was I was kidding around with my grandson. I talked to him about him before. He's 14, and he's saying, I need to find some place. No, he just turned 15. I'm sorry, he just turned 15 because he says, oh, I need to work. I'm working, try to make some money. I said, know what I was doing at 15? I gave him one of my back of my day, you know.
Yeah.
At 15, I was taking a train from Edison, New Jersey up to Newark in the Ironbound district of Newark, working in a warehouse until midnight. And I was 15 years old. Now, I don't want my 15-year-old grandson to do that today, okay? But do what you have to do, and you learn the work ethic. You learn that it's okay to get your hands dirty. It's okay to make some money and then maybe save a little of it so that you can do something more with it later. But that's when we say displaced workers, that's a temporary thing. So if they can upskill, then that will work out. And that goes back to that three-legged stool you and I talked about before. I think that's necessary. Now, getting on, because we're getting a little short on time, getting on the universal basic income. Well, we're kind of experimenting with that now, aren't we? Right? The federal government has said, we're going to give $1,200 to people, $500 for each dependent, that kind of thing. By the way, not everybody got that, right? But still, that $1,200. Well, first of all, that $1,200 probably didn't go very far for someone who is completely out of work, right? So if you're talking about the server or the busser at a restaurant who was busting their butt, right, to make ends meet poorly, right? Mm-hmm. Now they don't have a job. Their rent is still $900 a month. They still have to pay that rent. They still have to buy groceries. The government's going to give them one check for $1,200. It's not going to go very far, right? And that's, to me, that's the fundamental problem with universal basic income, because how much is enough? And if we start with the premise that this is a good thing, that people need to make more money, right? And it's usually because technology has displaced them, right? That's what we're usually talking about, right? The steel mills, they're down 3,000 people because that's been displaced by robots and by other technology. So what do we do with those folks? Well, I know, we'll just give them money. How about just give them some income? Well, how much income? I heard some people say 1,000 a month. I heard people say 2,000 a month. Okay, so think about this. What are the incentives of getting $1,000 or $2,000 a month for doing nothing, right? There's not much incentive there for you to go and upskill yourself. Now, if the government wants to do this in this partnership, right, instead of just giving the money to the people, I would say, well, perhaps we need to use some of that money to subsidize your additional training and education so that you can earn this money on your own. And then make it a real long-term loan if you have to, right? Maybe a, 40-year note, something like that. I don't know. We could talk about that later, but I'm not a huge fan of universal basic income as it has been described, only because of the disincentives that it can create. But that's just my opinion. I've seen people that get money for nothing, at least we think that it's nothing, and they'll actually say, well, I'm not going to look for a job because I got this money coming in.
I had an employee at one time that did just that. I had promoted her, but this is back during the recession, and she was actually counting the days until she could go back on unemployment. And so the day that after I promoted her was the last day that she had to wait, and she quit. Yeah. She quit because she could now sit at home and collect money. She was brilliant. I mean, she was, I don't want to make her out like a rocket scientist, but she was great at what she did. She was a great employee. She didn't cause any drama in the office. I loved having her there. And what happens? You double her salary, but the timing was wrong because now she could stay home. And I don't know her personal situation. Maybe she had kids at home. Maybe she needed to do that, and maybe she was getting along the best way she could. Nothing against her, but I know most people, and maybe everyone, feels better about themselves when they have a sense of accomplishment. Well, if you're not doing anything, it's hard to have a sense of accomplishment. You have to accomplish something. Yeah. And so I worried about her, and I couldn't tell you her name if I had to. I can barely tell you your name. But, it's just...
I forget all the time.
But my point is that man, I just wish the best for everybody. And I wish things could have been different with her. I didn't know any of that until after she left. And the laws, I couldn't go call her and chase after her to come back. So it's one of those things that, you want everybody to feel good about themselves. You want everybody to have a sense of importance and significance, and to be successful. Well, they can't do that if they're getting paid to stay home. There's no incentive to do that.
No. But having said that, Ron, this current situation is so unusual. We forced ourselves to stay home. In other words, we said we're not going to go to work.
Yeah.
Okay. Our businesses aren't going to be open because of the disease that's out there. There probably should be some way to compensate people for that. One way, one of the proposals I heard was that have a moratorium on mortgage payments, moratorium on rent payments. Because, the problem with having a moratorium on rent payments is that the landlords still have to pay their mortgages. I mean, So what are you going to do there, right? So you'd have to have a moratorium on everything. Well, that wasn't going to happen. And so they decided as a Band-Aid, in my opinion, is to have the PPP, to have the, which didn't work well, by the way. It only worked well for those, well-heeled companies that had a good relationship with large banks.
Yeah.
They didn't need the help, really. But anyway, they got it because they could. And I shouldn't say they didn't need the help. They did. I mean, they employ 500, 1,000 people. So yes, they were able to help a lot of people. But as far as that $1,200 thing, again, like I said, it's an experiment on UBI. And I don't know if that experiment is successful. And now they're talking about a second round of it. So I don't know how that's going to work. But I'm not a big fan of UBI, only because of the disincentives it could cause. Mm-hmm. Not in everybody's case. Some people would use it as it's designed, right? This is just simply temporary. I could still feed my family at least something until I find work. But if you're going to use that to displace your income or to replace your income, right? And you're going to get that every month, let's say, because under UBI systems, I see you get monthly payments. Then it's going to be, all right, now people are going to do a little calculation and say, well, if I'm going to make $17 an hour there, it really comes down to $12 an hour. And I don't want to do it for $12 an hour because I'm getting $5 an hour to sit home. Yeah. You see? And that becomes a problem. And so there has to be some kind of string attached to universal basic income, in my opinion.
I think you're exactly right. Unfortunately, government, I want to say this, graciously and correctly, they deal with such large numbers of people in such a wide span. It's hard to do something that's equitable for everyone. It's hard to put a lot of thought into legislation that some are just going to vote based on the pork for their particular constituents. Mm-hmm. I realize how hard it is to get that stuff passed and get it in effect, but I wish they could do that with more thought involved that helped everyone. Mm-hmm. I want people to be able to pay the rent, to buy food. Mm-hmm. But as you say, if it displaces normal income, there's no reason to go back to work. That hurts everybody. When we don't have people working, we don't have productivity levels up where they can be. And
it becomes a spiral, Ron. It becomes a spiral because then they say $1,000 a month is not enough now.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be inflationary eventually. Exactly. Right. So, and because everybody gets $1,000, now that's the new floor of income, right? And so now they say, oh, I need 2,000. And what happens next month? I have 5,000 until the dollar is so inflated that we'll have to say, okay, now we have to cut back. And what happens when you give people money and then you say, well, that program's not working, so we're going to cut it back? People think they lost something.
Right.
Right. And that's not going to go well politically. That's for sure.
No. It reminds me of the old joke in Russia, and this is back, I think, after Khrushchev, or maybe it was during Khrushchev, where they would fill up the wheelbarrows full of rubles or whatever it was, and go to buy a loaf of bread. The wheelbarrow was worth more than the money was.
Yeah.
So we can easily see it's going that direction as well. Let's talk about opportunities before I get all depressed and
okay. Yeah. No, this isn't depressing. Look, there are always opportunities out there, Ron. There are just always opportunities. People are very creative. we're seeing a lot of opportunities for online businesses now. I just got done saying a moment ago that I had to switch the way I delivered my intro to business class. After I switched it over, I know I'm going to have to do the same thing in the fall. I'm teaching a similar class in the fall. So now, guess where my focus is going to be? Creating online businesses, or businesses you can run online and face to face. And
Excellent.
so that's what we're going to be doing, you know. So there's lots of opportunities out there. You just have to think about them. But of course, in order to take advantage of opportunities, you have to learn how to solve problems, how to approach the opportunity in such a way that you could take advantage of it. And that again goes back to that three-legged stool we talked about before. But I do see a lot of opportunities. I see a lot of businesses thriving. You know, there were a lot of businesses that started during the Great Depression and they are thriving today.
That's right.
You know, Allstate Insurance is an example of that. Charles Schwab is an example of that, right? Allstate Insurance started off door to door selling insurance. That's what they were doing, you know. And so, you know, for a few cents a week, you know, you have life insurance. Well, that money got invested and, you know, rest is history. That's how it works. You know, take an opportunity and just seize on it. And the key is not be afraid to fail. And so the opportunities are out there. There's lots of them out there and everywhere, including education. We are trying to redesign the way that we're going to be delivering education in the fall at P&W. We have a task force that we just talked about today. In fact, in a meeting just before I saw you, it's kind of where I was. And it was, you know, we're trying to figure out the best way to deliver for the benefit of our students. This situation forces us to think a little bit differently. So, like I said, think differently. There's opportunities out there, and there's going to be millionaires made from this pandemic. I hate to put it that way because people are sick and dying, but there'll be people that will really take advantage of the opportunities here.
Well, I think you're exactly right. How do people, if they have, we're right at the end of our time. How do people get in touch with you if they want to?
Well, they can swing by the house. No, don't do that. Anyway, I'm not giving you my address. But my email address is asindone, that's ASINDONE, at pnw.edu.
Excellent.
And I'm Tony Sindone, in case you forgot who I was. And so anyway, certainly get a hold of me. Email is probably the best way. I'm a little reluctant. You have my cell phone number, but I'm not going to do it on the air here. So, but that's pretty much the way to get a hold of me. Again, I'm a clinical associate professor of economics, finance and economic development at P&W, and I would love to hear from your viewers, your listeners, and maybe we can chat with some of those folks as well.
Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for being with us today. You've been listening to the Information Playground, and I'm Ron Bush. I own Ron Bush Consulting. We're a company that helps other companies, other organizations stay safe on the web. Give us a call. We do risk assessments, things like that. You've been listening to us either on WVLP or on one of the on-demand platforms, The Information Playground. Check out my book on Amazon. It's called Staying Safe in a Very Dangerous World. Think before you click. I hope to have it joined by another book here next month on securing your organization. So with that said, contact me, Ron, at ronbushconsulting.com, or contact the station manager, Greg Kovich, a real nice guy, at WVLP. His email address is info@wvlp.org. Thank you for being with us today, and all the best to you.